It was an unceremonious end to what turned out to be a special season for the Dallas Cowboys, losing 30-22 to the Los Angeles Rams in the Divisional Round in what was much more of a beatdown than the final score indicates. The club is now thrust into the offseason trying to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. Granted, they deserve a ton of credit for being in the second round at all, considering they began with 3-5 record before becoming the only team in franchise history to recover and win the NFC East and a subsequent wildcard game, being wholly counted out from being able to do either. That was a nod to both their resilience and talent, the latter routinely having to overcome the ineptitude of the play calling and sometimes the execution on the field itself. All the while, the defense stood their ground as one of the best units in the NFL before meeting their match in Los Angeles. The problem with talent is the attrition that comes with it annually, as contracts expire and the Cowboys are left to decide who stays and who goes. With NFL free agency now in full swing, things are beginning to take shape in North Texas. They decided to forego diving into the first wave that saw a list of players land windfall, overpaid deals, but got extremely active in the second wave. Between signings, re-signings and meetings with big-name talent, things are picking up steam in a big way for the Cowboys. The meeting with All-Pro safety Eric Berry has proven fruitless at the time this article goes to print, and they're not twiddling their thumbs waiting on him to make a decision. The club will have a meeting with George Iloka as well, as they continue their efforts to upgrade the safety position. Based on the meetings with Jethers, Berry and now Iloka, it's clear the Cowboys are no longer eyeing a move of Xavier Woods, but instead a replacement for Jeff Heath in the strong role. Iloka immediately resolves that issue, and in a big way, without the need to give up draft assets or a mega contract in the process. It's a ready-made fix for the Cowboys and gets even more so when considering Iloka's agent, Ron Slavin, is familiar with Dallas, being based out of Southlake, TX, and currently representing cornerback Orlando Scandrick, who spent 9 years with the team. As an additional aside, Iloka is a former Boise State player, the school the Cowboys have recently fondled over the past few years, and a native of Texas, born in Houston before graduating from Kempner High School in Sugar Land, TX. He's also 6 feet 4 inches, 226 pounds, and that undoubtedly has passing game coordinator Chris Richard drooling, seeing as former Legion of Boom engineer loves lengthy defensive backs. Roundly regarded as one of the best safeties in the NFL, talent isn't the reason teams are guarded on Berry. He's battled availability issues at several points throughout his career, and his bout with cancer isn't the health issue that's concerning. The 5 games he missed in 2014 was actually due to a high ankle sprain, and not the Hodgkin's lymphoma. In actuality, Berry reported to the Chiefs and remained available in 2015 while going through chemotherapy, and that in and of itself is a story that demands respect. His other ailments have been more of the NFL variety though, having torn his ACL in 2011 and later suffering a torn Achilles in 2017. He'd return in 2018 but complain of a sore heel, which was determined to Haglund's deformity, a congenital defect that creates a bone spur that digs into a person's Achilles. As of now, he has not had surgery to repair his heel, and that could lead to issues with his Achilles going forward. The Cowboys are taking all of this into account. It's not for lack of production that Quinn is on the trade block, but instead due to the financial state of the Dolphins. The Pro Bowl pass rusher is set to hit the salary cap in Miami for a hefty $12.93 million in 2019, and the team would land 100% of that as savings if they trade or release him. They obviously prefer the former, seeing as it'd land them assets in return. For a Cowboys team in dire need of shoring up a defensive line that was dominant in 2018 but already looks like a shell of its roster self in March, looking into the situation on Quinn makes sense. A former first-round pick, 14th overall, at the Los Angeles Rams, Quinn played 7 seasons with the organization before heading to the Dolphins in March 2018 via trade. It was a cap move for the Rams at the time, with Quinn being on the back end of a 6-year deal signed in 2014. He's had his bumps and bruises over the course of his time in the NFL, but has been mostly durable, having been available for fewer than 15 games only twice in his 8-year career. For a more recent scope on his availability, it's key to note he's played in 31 of the Dolphins' last 32 games, a stellar statistic for one of the most bruising positions in the game. Add this to his production and Quinn becomes very attractive to the Cowboys, but at what price? Because they'll give up assets and money in an unavoidable extension. The current rumor is a 2024 round pick as the trade ask, but for now, that's all it is, a rumor. Cobb agreed to terms with the Cowboys on a one-year, $5 million contract just one day after visiting with the team. He'll be looked upon as an immediate replacement for Cole Beasley, who now plays for the Buffalo Bills, and he's more than capable. Cobb is a former second-round pick of the familiar Green Bay Packers who went on to land Pro Bowl honors in 2014. He played 8 seasons in Wisconsin and finished his final contract in 2018, hitting the free agency market as the Packers opted to not re-sign him. Cobb would not only bring his veteran presence to the Cowboys but also an ability to flex from the slot to the outside, giving offensive coordinator Kellen Moore the ability to be more creative with his WR usage. He'll have to work to prove he's still an impactful target though, coming off of his worst season of production as a pro. That said, there can be no debate about his ability when healthy. One thing is already guaranteed, and that's the shakeup within the WR depth chart. It was a rough year for Austin, but he'll get a mulligan. The veteran wide receiver was set to hit NFL free agency this March, but he'll instead return to the Dallas Cowboys, officially signing a one-year deal worth $1 million with $500,000 guaranteed. The cap number on his deal maxes out at $1.328 million due to the inclusion of $750,000 in active game day bonuses and another $250,000 if the Cowboys make the playoffs. The base salary is not far above the veteran minimum for his tenure, listed at $805,000, and the guaranteed money is very team-friendly. Depending upon how things shake out in 2019, particularly with the signing of Randall Cobb to replace Cole Beasley and the NFL Draft coming up, wherein the Cowboys will likely select a long-term solution for both that role and as a returner, the jury is out on if Austin survives the final cutdowns. He's a team favorite and very well may stick around, but should the team opt to move on, the dead money hit is only $500,000. There's a reason the casual fan has no clue who Ladouceur is. It's because you never hear his name, and that's how it should be when you're a long snapper. The moment you become aware of what he is doing on the field is the moment he's not doing his job, which is to make perfect snaps each and every time, without fail. It's easily the most thankless job in the sport of football, but it's ironically one of the most important as well. The 37-year-old Canadian has literally had a perfect career at the professional level, having not once registered a bad snap in his illustrious 14-year career. Most won't understand what it takes to achieve such a feat, but the Pro Bowl long snapper knows all too well. He's so good at what he does, NFL officials had to create a penalty to call against him last season, i.e., the infamous snap infraction. Ladouceur agreed to re-sign with the Cowboys on a one-year, $1.1 million deal in 2018, and has re-upped on a one-year, $1.03 million for this coming season. It's not unusual for the Cowboys to carry 2 long snappers during the summer months. This helps alleviate the workload on Ladouceur while giving them a chance to see if the new guy can be a potential successor. With those 2 thoughts in mind, they've signed Drew Scott to the roster in March. Scott spent time with the Oakland Raiders in 2018 but wasn't able to dig his heels in with John Gruden and co., but the Cowboys don't mind having him around for insurance and workload management. He spent 3 seasons with Kansas State before making his way to the NFL, and although he will in no way, shape or form be up to the challenge of threatening Ladouceur, he will have a chance at possibly raising someone's eyebrow. Covington is an underrated signing that could pay off in a big way. The 26-year-old lands in North Texas by way of the Houston Texans, where he played after being dual-drafted, in the 6th round of the NFL Draft and in the 5th round of the CFL Draft the same year, 2015. It's not difficult to surmise why both leagues wanted him, considering the 6'3", 300 lb. Interior specialist was named All-Conference USA as a sophomore at Rice University, and drew comparisons to Pro Bowl talents Michael Bennett and Lorenzo Alexander in pre-draft workouts. Covington, not to be confused with linebacker Chris Covington, who is also on the Cowboys roster, is a big body that can stop the run with ease but also disrupt in the opposing backfield. This makes him an ideal fit in Dallas, particularly now that they've moved on from David Irving. Covington joins the Cowboys on a one-year, $2.5 million deal with $1.25 million in guaranteed money. Hyder is a three-year veteran who found his way to the NFL by way of the New York Jets, who grabbed him out of the undrafted free agent pool in 2014. He'd go on to be released in August of that year, failing to survive final roster cutdowns, but landed on the Jets' practice squad. Eventually he'd dig his heels in for the Detroit Lions, spending 4 seasons there before satisfying his final contract in 2018. The 27-year-old was a rotational talent in Detroit in his 24 games there, but his 2016 season showed some very real promise, when he broke out to the tune of 8 sacks in only 2 starts with 16 games played. The veteran pass rusher found that potential temporarily derailed the following season, when he suffered a torn Achilles and landed on injured reserve, ending his season, registering just 1 sack that year. A local product of Texas Tech, the Austin, Texas native is thankful to get another shot in the NFL, and especially in his home state. Hyder landed a one-year deal worth a max value of $887,500, and that's great value for what he might become when dropped back into a 4-3 system, such as the one he delivered 8 sacks in for the Lions before they converted to a 3-4. This move won't break the internet, but it's key for the Dallas Cowboys. It was a no-brainer they'd look to bring back swing tackle Cameron Fleming, and they did just that on the first day of 2019 league year, on a 2-year deal worth $7.5 million that locks him in through the 2020 season. The team began ramping up its search for new offensive linemen in a big way in 2018, particularly after the first and most overpriced wave of NFL free agency had passed. The usually stout OL unit was disturbingly aggressive in 2017, after losing left guard Ronald Leary to the Denver Broncos and right tackle Doug Free to retirement. This created issues that forced the Cowboys to move pieces around as they desperately fought to keep the most important core on the team playing at an elite level, which included La'el Collins taking up residence in Free's vacated spot on the right edge, while usual swing tackle Chaz Green was promoted to starter at left guard, to disastrous results. Re-signing Fleming is essential, and I'd grade it as one of their most important deals this offseason. Never leave your stove on, Cowboys. An agreement on a long-term deal didn't land in 2018 between the organization and Lawrence, and, as such, he played under a franchise tag that paid him $17.1 million. That's a hefty sum, yes, but it's tethered to an equally hefty risk for Lawrence, whom the club was essentially asking to prove himself by replicating the success from his career-best 14.5 sack year in 2017. They also wanted to see him remain available after battling a list of injuries earlier in his career, before they heaped a pile of cash on the table to keep him locked in for the long term. The fiery pass rusher did his part, and has now been on the field for the last 34 games while delivering 25 sacks in his last 2 seasons. That's more than Khalil Mack or Von Miller, and it was achieved with a torn labrum. It is now once again time to talk turkey, and Lawrence rightfully wants some cranberry sauce thrown in as well, considering the one-year wait and the fact the Cowboys have more than enough salary cap space to pay him his value while not disrupting anything else they'd like to do this offseason. Lawrence will hold out and delay shoulder surgery until he gets his deal, and the longer this drags out, the more it negatively impacts everything else the team wants to do. The club opted to sign the March Lillard out of free agency in 2017 as insurance at the linebacker position. He was a roster casualty of the Chiefs at the time as they worked to trim their 90-man roster down to the mandatory 53-man head count. March Lillard was originally signed as an undrafted free agent by Kansas City in 2015, inking a 3-year, $1.585 million deal at the time. When released in 2017, the Cowboys made their first attempt to land his services by submitting a waiver claim that was trumped by the Miami Dolphins. Neither that stint nor the subsequent one with the Seahawks lasted long, but the Cowboys liked what they saw from him in both a special teams capacity and as a rotational LB. As such, he remained to fulfill his initial 2-year deal and has now inked a 1-year contract worth the veteran minimum $720,000. With Damian Wilson now with the Chiefs, ironically, March Lillard will get a very real chance to make a name for himself this summer. On the defensive line is paramount for the Cowboys right now. The future of Lawrence hangs in the balance, after seeing himself tagged a second straight year, but refusing to sign the tender. Negotiations will continue with the hopes of getting the deal done sooner than later, but the Cowboys have until July 15th to make it happen. Meanwhile, they've moved on from David Irving, long before he announced his retirement, and the indefinite suspension on Randy Gregory looms large. These being the facts, it made sense they'd reach back and get a deal done on Russ, having picked up the 2019 option on their sole exclusive rights free agent. Ross initially signed a 2-year, $1 million contract in 2017, and has just 19 combined tackles in 16 games, but 5 have been for a loss, and he has 9 hits on the opposing quarterback with 2 sacks. Those are more than solid numbers considering his minimal snap count, and being an ERFA gave the Cowboys sole discretion to either exercise his option or to let him walk outright, because he wouldn't have had the right to negotiate with other teams unless the latter occurred. They had until March 12th to make their final decision, and wisely chose to keep the talented lineman in tow. Olawale is returning to the Cowboys, and the move creates some questions. The veteran fullback will re-sign with the club on a 3-year deal without $5.4 million and $2.8 million in guarantees. It's a bit of a surprising move for the Cowboys, when you consider not simply the re-up, but also the numbers on Olawale's deal. Not only is it for more than 1 year, but it also carries 51% in guaranteed funds. The question now becomes, will they scheme him into a bigger role on the offense? They'll now have to, because he's not being paid as a special teamer, part-time blocker for Ezekiel Elliott anymore. Scheme issues combined with lack of execution on his part to make for a rough first NFL year in North Texas, and one most remembered by the dropped touchdown against the Indianapolis Colts that could have swung momentum. With longtime offensive coordinator Scott Linehan now out of the picture, the new contract is a strong hint at what Kellen Moore wants to use him going forward. To be clear, there's a lot of potential in Olawale, it's just that the jury is out on if the Cowboys can tap into it, or if they'll soon find themselves eating $2.8 million in dead money. The move definitely puts writing on the wall for Rod Smith as well, a team favorite backup to this point. There's a new free agent tight end headed to the Cowboys. They've signed tight end McElroy to a 2-year deal worth $1.08 million, adding another body at a position of need. At first blush, this appears to be a move that will directly challenge Rico Gathers for the 4th spot in the core. As the team works to fill their 90-man roster this offseason, it's safe to say neither McElroy nor Gathers are guaranteed a spot in September, considering the NFL draft is rapidly approaching, but it does provide some insurance for now. Like Gathers, McElroy lands in North Texas as a project player who'll need to be converted to a professional tape. The 26-year-old didn't play a snap of football until 2017, and that includes high school where he opted for baseball instead. He spent time in the junior college baseball ranks after high school and a year on the diamond for the Texas Longhorns, but would then transfer to Cameron University before ultimately being drafted by the Atlanta Braves in 2014. From there he spent 2 seasons in the minor league farm system before abruptly deciding he wanted to try his hand at basketball, becoming a walk-on at Oklahoma State in that sport. That's quite a path. It won't get any easier if the Cowboys draft another at the position, and they likely will. The king is back. This column is going to print 429 days after Jason Witten stood in front of the media and proclaimed he saw too many positives, and asserted how he felt too good to retire from the Dallas Cowboys. The statement came on the heels of an emotional loss to the Seattle Seahawks in Week 16 of the 2017 season, with the future Hall of Fame tight end fighting back tears at the time. And so it went. The Cowboys were thrilled to have their resident Ironman going forward and began to prepare their free agency plans and draft board accordingly, knowing they were set at the position for at least one more year. 88 days after the comments were made, the team restructured his contract, operating under the premise he'd stick around. 25 days after the restructuring, Witten doubled down on his commitment, and further noted he'd like to play until he's 40 and that his plan was to, absolutely, be on the field. 9 days after that reaffirmation, he notified the team he would retire and join ESPN Monday Night Football. And now, only 308 days after that about-face, Witten has notified ESPN he's leaving the booth to return to the Cowboys for a 16th season, on a one-year, $5 million deal that includes only $2 million in base salary. It's a perfect renewal of vows for both sides, from both a short and long-term roster perspective.